Welcome everyone to episode 127 of Raw Sport. My name is Ahmed Al-Huli. We're back with a huge show with one of the generals of Australian boxing, the man himself, Mr. Angelo Di Carlo. And how are you, mate?
Not bad, mate. Thanks for having me once again, Ahmed. Really appreciate it.
Never a dull moment with you on Raw Sports, mate. Hopefully another cracker of a show. I think
Let's
the
see what happens.
last time we had you on, I think there was an earthquake in Australian boxing.
Jeez, that's a compliment.
All right, mate. There's since then there's been some huge changes in the sport that you've been a part of. We've seen a new era being born and an alliance that's come together between Ace Boxing Group, which you are the founder of, and No Limit. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, look, I mean, we were approached early on in the year, or we were in talks last year. We were approached by the Rose brothers to start working in conjunction with them on promotions, on fighters, on really trying to do what's best for fighters more than ourselves. And I think I loved what I was hearing, and it's all come to fruition.
Fantastic. The Rose brothers, No Limit, have done a great job in working with Fox in elevating the sport. We've seen the cross promotional aspect of the sport moving into NRL, into AFL, the two larger codes in this country. What do you think this relationship does for Australian boxing?
Well, first and foremost, look, they're the only ones to have the platform. So working with them gives the ability to all of my fighters and fighters that I'm associated with. I've got about maybe 25 fighters on the books. And on top of that, I work with a lot of other promoters, matchmakers, trainers, that sort of align to me, which means that bag of fighters is now available to the No Limits boys, which is huge because the exposure that they can get you is far beyond anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, we're a pretty small market here, and segmentation doesn't really work for us. We need to be working together, especially people like yourselves and No Limit, who have, I'd say, the majority of the elite fighters in this country. So, what I think this is a huge step forward in the right direction because now we have two big organizations working together. What else needs to happen?
Look, I think other promoters need to join camp. The majority of the promoters are working with No Limits or myself, so that's helping. I mean, yes, we have that fragmentation of, the DAZN guys, which is Mick Francis, right? That's trying to stay away from us, but for what reason, I'm not sure. All it's doing is virtually giving their fighters less opportunity because reality is DAZN doesn't work for Australia. Now, as most people know, I was the first one to bring Eddie Hearn to Australia, and he brought with him the DAZN package, right? Well, our time slots don't work. So their numbers they're getting, I won't get into this won't talk about numbers, okay? Because I won't be disrespectful in any way. But let me tell you, their numbers are well below what Fox Sports and Main Event are getting. So fighters are getting much better exposure on Fox Sports and Main Event because the DAZN app really doesn't suit our time slot, right? Because when you look at it, when we're fighting here in Australia, it's it's in early hours of the morning overseas, so it doesn't work. So, and I don't think it'll ever work in Australia. I mean, Eddie's had a good play at it, and as you know, I was the first one to do a show with him here in Australia. Numbers weren't great. He will tell you that if he's honest, right? And it's a big job. I mean, it's not. He might get to it, but we're talking many years down the track.
And Australia is a very unique market, as you've just pretty much described. Our time zone is very different to the rest of the world. So any evenings here is in the larger markets in the middle of the night. So a dedicated platform locally is essential to the growth of any sport here. Hence why we see
Australian boxing, exactly. Yes.
the AFLs are on Fox, the NRLs are on Fox. Boxing needs to be on the largest network in the country.
Yeah.
Well, not the largest network in the country, because Nine, I'd say, is probably bigger, but it's got to be on a large network platform like Fox that's willing to invest into the sport and cross promote it through the AFL and NRL, because that's what it needs. At the end of the day, many people are regular fight fans, but you got to bring them back in somehow, and that's what they've managed to do.
They've done a good job of it. As you know, before the Rose brothers had Fox Sports, I was one of the first ones to have Fox Sports. One of the first. There's many before me, which was Jeff Finnick, Angelo Hyder, Jamie Myers, Brian Amatruda, but we were one of the earlier ones, and we weren't able to do that crossover that worked. We didn't have the media behind us, and Fox Sports weren't giving us the time the way they are the Rose brothers. So obviously they've got the right formula, hence the reason they're getting numbers, hence the reason they've got pay-per-view, something that we never had. So it's great for Australian boxing.
Liam Paro, and one of your fighters, you brought him up, you took him overseas. He defeated the hardest man in the division at the time, who was Sabril Matias, the boogeyman. Nobody wanted to fight him. He defeated him in his hometown in Puerto Rico. He got here zero recognition in terms of media, minimal, if anything. The comeback after his loss and re-rising back through this Fox machine has been phenomenal. He's everywhere, and we've seen it from the outside, but from the inside, Ange, what's that like?
It's huge because, we need to understand that without that machine, really what Liam done overseas, winning a world title against a guy that was 23 wins, 23 knockouts, had just killed somebody in the ring. Nobody wanted to fight him. He was a Puerto Rican hero. Liam should have come back as one of the biggest heroes Australian boxing ever had. It was sad. Yes, there was about 500 people when he come back from Puerto Rico, but the media didn't get behind him. But with this machine that we currently have, and with the No Limit boys, I think that's the reason why Liam's name is all of a sudden on everybody's lips. I mean, he is a young kid still on the rise, and I think he can win a second world title.
All right, let's talk about the landscape in general now. As a sport, how are we doing? What's your assessment so far? I haven't spoken to you in a while. What's your current assessment now that you've done this partnership? No Limit's got more access to more fighters. Other promoters are starting to work with them. Where are we as a sport?
In the Australian market?
Yeah, we'll start there.
Look, I think we're on the rise. Okay, it's not just about the Tszyu brothers at the moment. They're great fighters and have been phenomenal for the Australian market, and actually helped the growth of some young fighters coming underneath. But all of a sudden, there are some other fighters that are also getting recognition under them, just like they gained recognition under some of the football players and NRL and AFL players. So that's now it's their turn to bring the youth up through them, of which they're starting to do a great job.
So we're seeing the market share expand. Basically, we aren't zeroed in on one or two fighters anymore. All of a sudden, the platform's got multiple fighters to work with and build the sport with, basically.
Well, give you an idea. Our last show that we done in a joint venture with the No Limits boys, I had 6 of my fighters on there, right? Or Ace Boxing had 6 of their fighters on there, which would never have been seen if we didn't do this joint venture. This next show coming up to the back end of the year, look, we'll probably have more. We'll probably have about 8 fighters. We need to start remembering our greatest fighters: Jeff Finnick, Barry Michael, Lester Ellis, Danny Green, Anthony Mundine. They were homegrown. Why are all these promoters, including myself, I made that mistake, so I'm accepting that. Why are we all looking for international promoters? Because the money's not there internationally. That's gone. The money that was there when I first brought Eddie into Australia, when he didn't understand the Australian market, was good. Was very good for the A side, for the signed fighters. I had Dempsey McKean and obviously Liam Paro signed there. They were on huge money, but the fighters on the undercard were on not much more than what the current market, Australian market is, right? What's happened now is a few other promoters have joined up with Eddie, but they don't understand the world market. But Eddie is very intelligent. Eddie has already learned extremely well on what the Australian market is. So he's able to take advantage of the Australian market with the lesser dollars, but because the current promoters that he's dealing with don't understand the international market, so they're underselling their fighters, and well and truly underselling their fighters. Now, obviously, I don't want to be talking dollars again because that's private, but I can tell you the current what the fighters are getting currently from that platform are nowhere near what I got when Eddie first came to Australia. Now, that's a businessman. It was him that said to me, Angelo, this is a business and we need to treat it like a business. I was treating it as a friend in the beginning, but there's no friendship in this business. This is business. It's simple as that. And that's something that I probably learned from Eddie. Eddie said you need to be hard, and you work hardest you can for your fighters, of which I did.
Wow. Speaking of the international market, we're seeing our fighters going overseas or wanting to go overseas. How do you see the current international landscape based off? I'd say over the last 18 months, there's been significant changes. And we're just talking off camera how the Tom Brown and PBC have come out and support the new TKO Muhammad Ali Revival Act, which is huge. It's going to change the landscape of the sport. So there's a lot of change happening overseas and in the boxing world in general. What are you seeing? What are your thoughts? What are you hearing? Do you like it? So on.
For me, look, in our last conversation last year, I spoke about Turkey entering the market. I'm not in favour of that. I know a lot of other promoters are not in favour of it. But of course, promoters are looking after, the large majority of promoters are looking after their own pocket. Okay? It's sad for me to see some very, very wealthy promoters, right, that are bowing down to Turkey, right? The truth is the top 5% are getting the huge money. The rest of them, I've had fighters fight over there, right, in Saudi. The money's very low. I've spoken to other fighters that have fought over there that are on very low money. So it's not like it's just the big boys, that are getting that huge money. So really, and there's so many great fighters that are sitting back waiting for that big payday. That may not ever happen.
So we're pretty much diluting the sport even more because the difference between the top and the bottom is going to be silly.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. I mean, unless you've got pulling power, unless you've got numbers, unless you can pull venues, you're not gonna get a call up. You're not gonna get the millions like everybody thinks there is. Like I'll nominate a figure. I had a fighter that went over there, right, fought a beast, right, and really got paid maybe double what he would have got here in Australia, right? Okay. it's really the money's not there unless you're with the big promoters and you are one of the big names, the Anthony Joshuas, the Furies, the Canelos. They're the type of people that are getting the money. The undercard isn't really getting the same sort of money.
So how is this good for our sport? And why is everybody clapping?
Everybody's clapping because reality is, as sad as it may sound, the pockets that are being filled are the promoters' pockets. I'm a promoter, okay, but let me tell you, I've never taken a percentage off a fighter, okay. So, but these are promoters that are taking large percentages off Turkey, right? Which, okay, they're entitled to, because as Eddie said to me many years ago, this is a business, and so if you look at it as a business, well then you treat it as a business. It's going to be good for them promoters that are willing to do that.
In the last mega fight, I was in the States. I was working with a boxing media company in the background, and a lot of the talk that was coming through was that there's huge resistance for that fight from TKO and the sanctioning bodies.
Hmm.
There was a lot of talk going on that the allegedly that the sanctioning bodies were not going to be allowed to go inside the ring and present the belts at the
Yep.
end of the main event. Now that week, Mauricio Sulaiman went on, did an interview, and he said, "You're going to need 2 to 3 bodyguards to stop me from going in." And he was getting, they were putting
Yep.
it all out there.
Yep.
What's your stance on the role of the sanctioning bodies in the sport currently and moving forward?
Look, sanctioning bodies need to be there because let's face it, unless you are the top 1%, everybody wants to see a belt on the line. Everybody wants to fight for a world title. All fighters. Now, when you got people like Canelo, they don't need a belt, right? Okay, but they did need a belt to get to where they are today. If you're a mega fighter like Anthony Joshua, he doesn't need a belt. He's still going to get the same people coming and watching. They're not watching him. They're not watching him to come see him win a belt. They're watching him because they want to watch him fight. So I think the belts need to be around. Look, I really have praise for a few of the organisations, and in particular the IBF and the WBO. They're two sanctioning bodies that have really helped a lot of Australian fighters. Look, I think they definitely need them, and they have the right to be in the ring to present the belts.
The speaking of the WBO, they're doing a lot of extra programs to educate fighters on social media, on financial literacy. I've been seeing that. I mean, Gustavo, who's the current president, has been on the show many times, and he's launched a lot of these programs. So they're one of the few that are trying to do things a bit differently. They even had Jake Paul do a seminar teaching fighters how to sort of enhance their social media. So I definitely agree with you that they are trying to do things to sort of innovate and evolve the sport as it currently is. Moving on, I want to bring you back home. Current deal is great. We got multiple promoters working together. Grassroots. What are we doing for grassroots, Ange? What's the plan for our grassroots? Are we going to see any contender series? Are we going to see anything, of the sorts to sort of develop this talent?
Look, that's something that the Rose Brothers and our team are talking about at the moment. We've got a few young kids that have we really believe can go all the way, and obviously bringing it on that platform very early in their career is going to be huge for them. So that's yes, we're going to try do working together with each other's fighters, and that will definitely help the sport.
Any contender-like series, Ange? We go to different places across the country and try and attract talent, local talent.
No, it's not something that we've spoken about, and maybe No Limit Boys themselves are thinking about that, but it's not something that I've been involved in. Obviously, they still have No Limits are still their own people, just like Ace Boxing Group are their own people. But we're working together, which is a huge step in the right direction. As you can see, look at Liam Paro's growth in a very short period, and some of my other fighters. So if we're ultimately looking at helping the fighters, okay, then the Fox Sports main event platform is the platform that you want to be on.
Absolutely. All right, Ange. Before we wrap up, we've had a question come through. This is an interesting one. I want to pop it up, and it says cross promotion fights were rarely happening before Turkey. Now they are happening monthly. That can only be good for boxing. What are your thoughts, mate?
Well, look, I mean, obviously it is great that other promoters are working together, but are they working together for the right reason? And that is to fill the pockets of the fighter and not the promoter. Because I think there's a lot of money that's actually going into the promoter's pocket rather than the fighter's pocket. Whilst yes, they are getting paid when Turkey's involved, right? But I just think that as long as the money's going to the right place.
And I got one as well to add to that. Now, we've seen Turkey shift his attention from the UK to the US.
Yeah.
Other than this Conor Ben and Eubank fight, not much has been happening in the UK in recent times. So he's now moved his attention towards the States. Are we going to still see that collaboration between Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn and Boxer and so on? Do you think that's still going to exist?
Look, I've got one of my fighters currently signed to Frank Warren's camp, right? Okay. Let me tell you, in my opinion, these people are working together simply because there's money to be made. They're not working together because they like each other. This is a business. And that's all it is. They're working together for business and business only. It has nothing to do with them enjoying their time together. I don't think you'd see these two promoters out having dinner together if it wasn't for a cause that Turkey was involved in.
There you go. All right, Mr. Angelo Di Carlo, before we let you go, mate, do you have any words of wisdom for us?
No, I just would hope that the Australian fighters understand that the greatest fighters that we've ever produced in Australia are the likes of Jeff Finnick, Danny Green, you got Lester Ellis, Barry Michael,
Anthony Mundine,
just to name a few, right?
Yeah.
They were all produced in Australia. The moment they went overseas, they had problems. So why don't we stick with the Australian promoters, right? And in this case, it happens to be No Limits, right? Stick with the Australian promoters that are able to give you the exposure that you need, which in turn brings sponsorship to you and recognition. That's what we really need to do.
I think if we do that, sorry to harp on, it will incrementally grow the sport enough to attract that corporate sponsorship, and then we can have that structure that we need to continually grow. Instead of going overseas, diluting ourselves and starting over again every single time.
1,000,000%. Keep this in mind. Our market here with 26 million people is very small. The world doesn't want to see Australian world champions because their pay-per-view numbers are very low on the world stage. So we need to stick to the Australian market. Let's build and grow in Australia and be an Australian icon.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen, the man himself, Mr. Angelo Di Carlo. Thank you very much for joining me on Raw Sport. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, legend. Thank you very much. Cheers.